Welcome to an episode of Neat Talk on the Rocks. Tonight we are going to be talking with Paul Menta in Chef Distilled, Key West, Florida. What's going on, brother? Welcome.
Welcome. Yeah, man. Glad to be here. Nice Friday night. Nice and warm.
Nice ice is an understatement. Here in New England, I'm in the middle of a little bit of a frosty snowstorm with some the pellets hitting the roof and wind going and snow on the ground. I hear tomorrow, though, when I wake up, it'll warm up and it'll all be gone. But it's just crazy how New England weather works. I hear it's toasty down in Key West, though.
Yeah. It's actually a beautiful evening. No wind, no anything. It's a very warm day. Um, so I'm a little jealous that you have natural ice for your drink as we get into that tonight.
Absolutely. All right, so let's see. Let's kick it off here. So, Paul, who are you and what do you do?
Um, and before I explain it, I just want to give you a heads up. If you could do yourself a favor, I want to try something later.
Okay.
If you have two glasses, could you pour yourself a little bit of rum and push it off to the side? Because like a wine, this one likes to open up, and I'd like to see the difference between the two later.
Oh,
we're going through this, it opens up.
absolutely. I always carry a Glencairn on me if I need it.
I figured. So, my name's Paul Menta. I live in Key West, Florida. I extremely enjoy all the different things I do. I've been a professional kiteboarder for the last 21 years. So when there's wind and weather and other people are unhappy, I'm ecstatic and I try to go and jump things and do all sorts of crazy stuff. And I'm also a chef. I've been a chef for the last, what I consider about 28, 29 years. I went to culinary school in Philadelphia and then was sent over to France and Spain where I did my internship. And that's where I learned to distill. Dating myself, that was in the 80s. So the thought of doing a distillery or anything was nowhere in my head because at that point, craft wasn't really around. That, opening a huge factory just wasn't in the game plan, and I really enjoyed cooking. My inspiration, the person I always cooked with, was my grandmother. So I learned to source locally from a very young age. I happened to be sent down to the market and get foods, and then go 30 years ahead, and who would know that I'd be opening a distillery. And one of the things I'd like to say about that is I'd like to thank every craft beer guy and woman that started out in that business that brought this to a point that we could actually do craft distilling, because I give them a lot of credit for bringing craft to where it is. Now all the crafts are mixing, and being a kiteboarder, a chef, a rum distiller, I mean, I, believe it or not, get to mix all my passions together, and that for me is really important, and it definitely affects the outcome of the rum that I produce. So, that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Absolutely, and it's interesting. So a little bit. I won't dive too deep. Not really much to dive deep into, but in a past life for myself, I went through some culinary school and did the whole chef thing too. So I fully understand where you're coming from. Your resume in that aspect, going to the other countries is very impressive, though. And you had said that that's actually where you learned how to distill. Was there someone in particular that you took lessons from, or did you go there to be a chef and happen to find yourself working in a distillery instead, or how did that come about?
Well, when I went on my externship, my chef in San Sebastian, I mean, and up in the Bilbao area, but mainly San Sebastian, Chef Marcos, he was the one, imagine that, a chef who likes to make a little beverage, and he was the one who was distilling. So that's where I got to learn on Sundays when we weren't working, because we were working a lot. There's a lot of, I spent months learning how to just make a fire for a paella. And I learned from him and a good friend of his that I went to work outside of the Dijon area and a couple other places, also distilled and distilled. Everybody in Europe seems to do a lot of home distillation, and then also they do some, some bigger or small batch. So I really understood how both of these um, products, being a chef, that they're all foods, and we're just using them in a different aspect. One's being used possibly as a solid and as a savory, and the other is being used as a liquid, but they're still going the same place, and we're still adjusting and figuring our palate to enjoy it. So that's why I thought, oh man, I want to name my company Chef Distill, because I think chefs would really make amazing distillers with our mindset.
Absolutely. The drive to search for the unordinary and kind of master perfecting it. Hell yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's, with the kiteboarding, I've been in 50 plus, I can't even tell you how many countries. And there's always been cooking or beverage involved.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to have that as like as a, as like my own little search engine to look through things, and to, really to take little pieces of things, was really a key to what, profiles and things I could do in my own neighborhood.
Sure, and I would expect too, diving just a little bit deeper into that. Going to all these places as a chef, open-minded and experiencing, their cuisines or the foods that they make, must have been, definitely great and eye-opening. But I would imagine you might have found yourself in a position where you were in a strange area, maybe a little, islands and ocean, so maybe cut off a little bit from the rest of the world, and then maybe you got to prepare a dish kind of and serve to maybe a few people or a group of people, kind of like an American dish that maybe they never experienced. So even having, an experience like that must be very fulfilling.
It is, because you're sharing something you learned somewhere else. Because a lot of times when we go somewhere, somebody's bringing me into their home because they find out my passion for cooking, and I ask them, "Can you show me who makes this?" And
Yep.
it's their aunt or uncle, and then I'd like to also show them something from somewhere else that I know they've never had. And as a side note, I can tell you from traveling all over the place for my culinary part, I learned more in South America probably than I did anywhere on culinary, only because of the utilization. I lived with a woman, and she only could afford, and there was only chicken around that week.
Mm-hmm.
We had 6 different chicken dishes that we never got sick of, and that taught me life lessons for both culinary and distilling, that I'm always going to have.
Absolutely. Very, very good to hear, and very interesting. I'm a little jealous. I've been around too. I've been around the world a few times. I've been to other countries, certainly around this country. But 50 or so countries are different spots for kiteboarding and all that other stuff. That's a pretty impressive resume. You definitely seem to be living an joyful life, and I definitely give you a lot of props for that. So as far as your rum goes, so we're going to be talking a little bit about specifically Bad Bitch Rum. So what makes your rum? I know there's a little bit of a story behind physically how the rum is made. What makes it different from most others out there? Process or something you do that most would be like, oh really, he does that, or something?
Yeah, so putting our kind of chef's hat back on.
Yep.
I For the Bad Bitch.
Wait a minute, you actually take your hat off? I leave mine on all the time.
Yeah. For the Bad Bitch, which is named after Spanish Marie, a famous rum runner. The point, she used to, a very quick story, and we can always get into her later. But
Sure.
when they would be bringing the rum over from Cuba, they weren't necessarily making it here in the Keys because it was too small.
Mm-hmm.
Cuba made all the rum, so it would come over in high proof. A lot of these people that were running rum, or would have it, and her and assistants, she would cut it with red wine, because you'd be talking like an 80 or a 90 percent So I decided to go with the chef's part of it and not use molasses. I wanted something that would be the equivalent of extra virgin olive oil to make my rum with. So I went with demerara sugar. And the reason I did that was because where our sugar cane is made, and then a lot of the processing houses, um, it took them about 10 years to create demerara sugar. It's super high in mineral content, and they made it for baking, so all those minerals would make better stabilization, more flavors, a lot more interesting things. So I asked them, well, I'd like to get some of this and try it and do my rum. And what a great experience I had because of the flavors I could get and pull out the butterscotch and some of the florals that come out of the aquifer in Florida where the sugarcane grows. So starting out with that and bringing out something that I could get out very, very clean because I strip my rum first
Yep.
to get all the alcohol out of the fermentation, and then I'll sit there and run it through a spirit still with a column, and I'll adjust it. Everything I have is hand, so I can really adjust to. I believe your tongue can outwit a computer any day as far as running on stills and everything. So I really, it's very important to me to do that. So bringing out this clean kind of butterscotchy, very nice, nosy rum, I said, okay, how can I combine it with a story? Because Key West is all about stories.
Yep.
So I got red wine barrels from our connections in the Burgundy region and Bordeaux, and I brought them over, and I wanted to age my rum in it. But first, I needed to have that chef's aspect, and I wanted the specifics of the tannins out of it. So I take the barrels when they come in, I bring them down the end of our street, about I don't know, 1,000 yards down the street, which is the ocean. And that part of the island, it's the Gulf of Mexico. The other side is the Atlantic. It's only a mile wide. And I fill up the barrels with seawater. It's kind of like the employee pool as well. It's nice to bring the barrels down there, go take a dip. We definitely make sure we make sure nobody's peeing. I'll add that note in there. Nobody's peeing in the ocean while we're doing this. And then we bring the barrels back to the distillery, and we let them sit. Make sure there's no leaks. Let them sit for about a day or two, and then we drain them. And then they sit and cure. Now, when I say cure, basically to me, after I drain them, what's happening is I treat it just like if I was curing a piece of beef or if I was curing some fish. Freshwater is a bacteria, and also it eats the enzymes that are flavor. So if you've ever had beef jerky or cured fish, it's very strong flavored, and the reason it's strong flavored is because the freshwater has been removed. So you really get those deep, rich flavors, and it's also stable against bacteria. So doing that with the barrel, I see this nice white caking going on inside the barrel, and I know the pores are open up. I remove the fresh water out of it, which to me means I can get more alcohol inside the pores of the wood in a shorter amount of time also, because the alcohol's not having to battle removing that fresh water, which I think delays a lot of time.
Sure.
So, so we soft cure these barrels, and it brings out a profile of our Bad Bitch rum that is very unique only to Key West. One of the questions I'll get a lot of times, and people say, "Who makes the best rum? Do you make the best rum?" And I say, I don't believe there's such a thing.
Right.
I think that rum comes from different areas, and you get to enjoy it from where it's coming from and what that locality brings to it. So in Key West, every day we have very big pressure changes. We have a lot of salt air, and we have salt inside of our barrels. Now, the one surprising thing is that salt inside the barrel also buffers the pH, which helps us bring out. We don't have such a low acidity level when this is ready. Usually, it takes about, I'd say, a good year and a half to 2 years is when I'm generally pulling these barrels. They're 60-gallon barrels,
Mm-hmm.
and I've sat and I've put it against some of our 5 and 6 year olds, and we've done blind tastings, and it's interesting. You get a lot of acceleration by using nature and some science it's not about the color of it. It's really about the flavor. That's why if you look at our bottle, there isn't a there isn't an age on it, because when it's ready, it's ready. It could be a year and a half, could be 2 years, 2.5, and I make notes on each batch because I think it's like wine. I think every batch is slightly different, and I think that's the best part about it because you always get a little bit of a different profile, and people notice those things.
Absolutely. And kind of back to I'll backpedal a little bit to the person or people who always come up and say, you know, do you make the best rum, or is this the best in the world? I think, to be fair, because taste being subjective to each person, the only fair way I think you'd be able to get away with asking that question would be on an individual basis, because as soon as you start comparing other people to the mix and having their tastes be so different, but if you were to take one person aside and put 10 rums in front of them and say, taste all these, which one is the best to you? I think you could do that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the order of that person's favorite is going to be the next guy or girl beside him.
Correct. And like, we do that every single day. I have 11 profiles that we use, 11 different styles. The two that are in your picture are the Bad Bitch and the Raw and Unfiltered, and they came about because we have so many people coming into our tasting room every day that we ask questions, and those are two separate styles. After you get through hundreds and hundreds of people and feedback, you really start to see certain people like something. So I'll use a funny way I like to tell people about it. It's an ice cream parlor, except we have rum. And when you only have vanilla and chocolate, well, that's fine too. But when you have 10 different type of profile flavors for people, everybody in the group's going to find something they like. And that's the way I like to approach it.
Sure.
I just want to make everybody kind of find something that they can have an experience with.
Absolutely. All right, so that brings me next to, so I'm curious, and I'm dying to put this in a glass that I'll be drinking immediately. Tell us what the best way to drink your rum is, either mixed or neat, with ice, Coke and rum. Explain a little bit on what the better way, and I know we had a conversation earlier, a day or so ago. I have a bottle of ginger beer here. I hope that you name drop that drink that you want to share. I'm hoping that you allow me to get to try that too. But so I'm going to, as of right now, I'm going to pour. So I'm not touching the Glencairn. I'm going to pour some out of the bottle right now that I'll sip neat. And then while you're talking, and if we get to the ginger beer version, wonderful.
Yeah, so I don't think, and I think any distiller or rum maker would say, I don't think there's any way to drink it wrong. It's the way you like it. But as far as a guide, there's a couple different things that I've noticed. Drinking this one neat can kind of more put you into the profile of maybe heading towards the cognac kind of profile on this one because of the red wine tannins in it. And like I had said, when it sits and opens up, I have a glass here. I start to notice some of those deep, earthy, current notes coming off the nose, and sometimes I'll get just the tiniest bit of tobacco. But as well, in our tasting room, we have it two different ways. We have a bottle sitting at room temperature, but remember, our room temperature is probably 80 degrees, and then we have some that we just chill the bottle.
Okay.
Because once alcohol gets too hot, depending on the glass. Now, if you're in a Glencairn glass, much tighter profile. I have mine tonight in kind of like a bigger, open, just a rocks glass.
That's what I'm drinking from right now. The one I put aside that you told me to pour earlier is in the Glencairn.
Right, because that'll actually work out really well. And in that bigger rocks glass, it's about the experience for people with, where the ethanol comes into play with this. And, it's good for things to breathe. Now, I will say,
Wow.
People have a tendency to, I like to, you can't see me, I'm smelling
Yep.
as it goes around. And after you take your first taste, what do I like to tell people? nice nose of it. And then what you do is you dip 2 fingers into your alcohol and rub them on your hands. And rub it and start to breathe in. Because the ethanol and everything is going to go away, and you'll start to find what some of the profiles are. It's a really good way to identify different rums and just get a feel for it and open up your senses as it's kind of happening. And when this guy did this in his room, it was like a cut commercial where everybody got silent. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, he's tasting your rum. So I learned a lot from him about tasting rum. So I mean, enjoy. Take your
Wow.
after that, take your first sip.
The smell from my hands is I don't want to. I mean, it's hard. I don't want to say it definitely changed when adding the friction and a little bit of the heat and the oils from your hands, but it's like it took on a whole other, almost like it became something completely different to the nose anyway. It's, I don't know, almost what am I picking out of there? I can't put my finger on it. I want to say like leaning towards maybe some kind of herbs or something
Yes.
that I'm getting.
Yep, exactly. Yep. Yeah, you almost get, there's almost like it's almost like a slight bit of grassy. I think something comes out from the cane, which is a tad bit of grassiness, but you also almost get like I don't want to say a flavor. It's in between oregano, but it's not as heavy.
Yes,
I very interesting.
I think that's what I think that is something that almost like a very faint cousin of oregano, maybe.
Yep.
Wow.
And that's notes that are in those French oak barrels that the tannins have actually brought out
Right.
from the grape and where it was grown. So it's really neat because I really believe the salt pulls these flavors out for us.
Sure.
So
now I have a big circular ice cube rock here waiting. Should I add that to the rocks glass and see how it changes even more?
yeah. So what have you taken a sip of it?
I have. Yep.
Just neat. Okay. Yeah. So what the ice is going to do is the ice is going to bring the flavor profile more to the top because it's going to push the molecules of the ethanol down to the bottom of the glass. So you're going to get more of a full burst of the barrel. And remember, these barrels they had 7 years old, 10 years old. So they're going to be more of a neutral in the wood. So you're going to get a different aspect of the barrel out. You're not just going to get that big burst of, the smokier in the wood part.
Right. And I'll tell you right now, right off the bat, and I hate to use this term just because it pretty much widely in the spirits industry, it's people who have been in the industry long enough consider it like if they hear somebody saying it, it's kind of the unofficial newbie quote. But my first reaction to sipping this was how incredibly smooth it really was, and when I had it in my mouth, the beginning in the middle very smooth, and then I started to get a little bit of a bite at the end, either right around swallowing or when it started hitting the back of the throat, and that's when I got like the warm and just a little tiny, I wouldn't even call it a kick to the face. It was pleasantly warm, but
So the pH, so balancing the acidity on this, and that I'm gonna tell you that you got that bite right above your Adam's apple as it went down.
yes.
Okay, that's the magnesium from the salt.
Okay.
That's coming together. When we had it analyzed, I was really curious about that because I'm like, I'm not getting rum should go down and be nice and warm in your chest. Like my chest is very nice and pleasantly warm right now, but there's this little, I call it, it's also a tickle you get in the throat as it goes down, and it kind of puts that question mark up. And what we discovered is the magnesium component inside the barrel, because there's a lot of
absolutely. It's very enjoyable. So next, moving kind of along while I enjoy this more. I heard you have a little bit of a story behind specifically the Bad Bitch rum bottle. A young lady back in the day was going around and doing some stuff. Would you like to kind of explain that story to us, and so everybody kind of
Sure.
understands behind the the name and